pull your strings behind the scenes. These people don't care. They don't have to call the insurance company because their claim was denied. They don't buy their own groceries. If you have a private jet, an offshore bank account, and an invite to Mar-a-Lago, go ahead and support your Republican representative. But if you're a regular person who feels like you're getting screwed over, if you are fed up with the status quo here in Washington that only works for those at the top, this majority is not fighting for you, but we are. Democrats are on your side, and we will fight with you every step of the way against the corruption, the lies, and the BS coming out of this administration. And we won't back this so-called deal. It's not a real solution, and it is certainly not a clean CR. This CR leaves families twisting in the wind with zero guarantee there will ever be a vote to extend tax credits to help everyday people pay for their health care. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this rule and no on the underlying legislation, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentlelady from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there is so much to unpack and to object to in the ranking member's opening statement. But I just want to comment on one of the issues. And I find the statement that Republicans were on vacation laughable. The idea that Republicans were on vacation during the shutdown, it's just simply false. It's false. Many of us were in Washington, or we were in our districts meeting with constituents, advancing local priorities, and staying fully engaged with our constituents in our work. Our dedication to serving the American people didn't pause during the shutdown. Whether in D.C. or back at home, which for the record, I was in both places, and many of my Republican colleagues were too, we were doing the work we were elected to do. And the real story here is not about the absence, it is about the commitment. And for Republicans, we never wavered. If the Democrats cared so much about working, they would not have shut the government down. And with that, I would like to yield 4 minutes to the gentlewoman from North Carolina, the esteemed chairwoman of the House.
El épico juego de acción online War Thunder está listo para hacer volar en pedazos tu rutina diaria. No es solo un juego, es acción real, donde el metal aúlla, los cielos arden y cada disparo chispea con impresionantes efectos especiales. Conoce el tanque Oplot T, una auténtica fortaleza sobre orugas. En el aire, el B-63 Destroyer puede arrasar posiciones enemigas en segundos. El buque M3, un moderno sistema de defensa antiaérea del que no puedes esconderte, te proporciona cobertura. Descarga War Thunder gratis en PC, PlayStation o Xbox.
It was a crisp 40 degrees outside when we adjourned at around 1:30 a.m. this morning, but with the amount of hot air being spewed by Democrats in the committee room for 7 straight hours, you would have thought we were in the dead of summer. Mr. Speaker, at this point, I don't think Democrats really agree on anything. Last night and into the early hours of this morning, they showed everyone that they couldn't even agree on what they're angry about. They went off on so many tangents that it would have been a miracle if they arrived at a single coherent thought at any point during our meeting. The American people will see the exact same thing play out from them during this debate and during general debate on the floor later today. Apparently, the only thing Democrats can agree on is that the government needs to stay shut down, and that the American people need to suffer even more than they have already made them suffer. We heard from Democrats repeatedly about the millions of people they believe are going to be affected when their own temporary COVID credits sunset at the end of this year. Their own temporary COVID credits. Did we hear anything about the millions of Americans who got walloped by Democrats when they shut the government down? Did we hear an apology from Democrats to the American people for deliberately misleading them over 40 days? Did we hear an admission that the only reason they shut down the government is to cover up for a catastrophic policy failure that they concocted and set an end date on? No, we didn't hear one of those things. Not one. Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised. This is the kind of behavior that Americans have come to expect from Democrats. Has anyone ever noticed how Democrats have developed such a visceral reaction when confronted about their abdication of responsibility? They shut the government down, and the moment you call attention to their own actions, all they do is obfuscate and start shrieking about unrelated things. Scientists should study this at length and try to come up with a cure. It's a serious affliction, as was evidenced numerous times over in our Rules Committee meeting. It's well past time to reopen the government and end the Democrat-concocted nightmare that Americans have been living through for over 40 straight days. The CR before us will end that nightmare. It will get this legislative body and the entire nation moving once more. Democrats should grow a spine and accept responsibility for their own failures. I urge a yes vote on the rule, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves her time remaining. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, you got to love these Republicans. The gentlelady from Minnesota says they weren't on vacation. I want to remind her, you haven't voted for 8 weeks. And most people define vacation as you don't have to show up to work and you get paid. That's exactly what Republicans did. They didn't show up to work and they got paid. It was a paid vacation. I now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I rise today in strong opposition to this bill. I'm a hell no on any legislation that strips health care away from millions of Texans. In my district, nearly 100,000 of my constituents rely on the Affordable Care Act's tax credits to pay for their coverage. Without these life-saving credits, many of them will go without health care at all. Every day during this shutdown, my office has heard from thousands of families across my district saying, "For the love of God, save my health care." And tucked away in this bill is a brazen payoff, millions of taxpayer dollars funneled to the benefit of a handful of senators, while families are struggling to afford groceries and health care. We are being asked to sign off on a deal that lines the pockets of the very people who wrote it. That is an insult to every hardworking taxpayer who expects honesty from their government. The contrast could not be clearer. Republicans are operating in the currency of cruelty and corruption, while Democrats are fighting with courage and compassion. The American people deserve better, and I will never stop fighting to protect the basic necessities every family needs to survive. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Minnesota.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, the American farmer needs this bill to pass. The American soldier needs this bill to pass. Our air traffic controllers need this bill to pass. The men and women who protect us here in this Capitol and all federal law enforcement need this bill to pass. I'm one of those who represents a lot of federal employees, and they've been without a check for a long time, Mr. Speaker. This is very simple, very simple. It's way past time to open the government up. There are going to be a lot of excuses about coulda, shoulda, woulda, and you need to take this provision or that provision out, or they're going to vote to keep the government shut down. Well, let me tell you something. The vote today, it is straight up or straight down. You vote to open the government up today, or you vote to keep it closed. That's all there is to it. Now, as for the provision that's been mentioned a few times about the Senate language, I have introduced a piece of legislation already to repeal the Senate language, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a vote on that as soon as we get back. Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time.
Reserve.
Gentlelady from Minnesota continues to reserve her time. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, you gotta love these guys. I mean, they're all introducing legislation to repeal provisions in a bill that they're going to vote yes on. I mean, you figure that out. Mr. Speaker, the previous question is the House Democrats' last attempt to make a change to this rule before it gets voted on. And I want to use this opportunity to talk about a last-minute provision that was slipped into the CR in the Senate. It's an outrageous giveaway to pad the pockets of 8 Republican senators. And it's one of the most corrupt things I've seen in my life. So if the House defeats the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to consider as adopted an amendment to the continuing resolution offered by Representative Subramanian which would strike the corrupt giveaway out of the text of this bill so it does not make it into law. Mr. Speaker, this is a massive payday for Republicans. It would allow 8 of their senators to shovel millions of dollars into their own wallets. I'm talking cash money, not for their states, not for their constituents, no, for their own personal bank accounts. Why should a United States senator or any party get a special right that nobody else has? No state legislator, no governor, no judge, no citizen in the entire country has this right, but we are creating it for a handful of Republican senators. It is immoral. I'd say it's unconstitutional. It is wrong. And it's probably the most brazen theft and plunder of public resources ever proposed in the United States Congress. And it was tucked into this legislation. And I want to speak directly to Republicans who say they can't vote with us because it will delay the reopening of the government. First off, that's exactly what these corrupt senators were hoping you'd say. Second, we absolutely can send this back to the Senate. They can quickly strip it and send the bill to the President. They finished this package in less than 2 days. This is one small thing that needs to be deleted. It's easy, and it can be done very fast. But, and please spare me the excuses that we'll get this done next week with a new bill. Once this is law, that's it. It is signed into law forever. It will never change. It is permanent, and you voted for it. And Republicans you all know that. So don't say you're going to pass some new bill next week to address this. That's just an excuse to do nothing that will fix it. Republicans moved at the speed of light to give tax breaks to billionaires, and the least they can do is give the same urgency to stop this shamelessly corrupt fleecing of the American people. Now, I get it. Trump is suing the U.S. government for $230 million, and I guess these senators want in on the action. They want their own payday, but I've never seen this level of grift, shameless corruption, and theft of public money in my entire life, ever. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question, and to discuss our proposal. I yield a minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramanian.
Without objection on the UC request, the chair will remind the gentleman from Massachusetts and others to please refrain from engaging in personalities in it. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member McGovern. I mean, you know what people hate more than seeing their costs go up? Is seeing their costs go up while corrupt politicians line their pockets with taxpayer money. That's what they really hate, but that's what this bill does. Republican senators slipped into this bill a legal pathway for them to personally receive millions of dollars in taxpayer money for being investigated after January 6th. And the other side talks about fiscal responsibility and says there's no money for health care, but somehow there's taxpayer money for Republican senators. This is an ethics violation, this is a breach of trust, and it calls into question the very legitimacy of this institution. So I put forward an amendment to reject this corruption, but committee Republicans voted it down last night, and they said they knew it was corrupt, but that there was nothing that could be done, and that the system didn't work. Well, you are the system. And House Republicans promised to vote on this next week as a standalone bill, but there's no guarantee that the Senate will act. In fact, they probably won't act, right? So you have the power to join us in righting this wrong today. So let's take out this ridiculous kickback. Otherwise, a vote for this bill is a vote for corruption. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I never said, Mr. Speaker, that this bill was perfect. And not everyone agrees with the provision, and our colleague from Georgia had just mentioned and is already addressing it. But what we do agree on is that it is critically important to get the government open, and that's why we are here today. Getting our federal employees paid, getting our troops paid, getting SNAP back on track, getting our...
Running hurts. Just do Tai Chi. It heals.
Men over 50 should not be running, lifting, or crunching. There's a smarter way. It's called Tai Chi. In 1 week, you'll see your energy. In 2 weeks, you'll feel your breath. In 3 weeks, your wife won't believe your results. Here is the personalized plan of short Tai Chi workouts tailored for beginners over 50. It takes just 7 minutes per day, beginner friendly and requires no equipment. You can work out anytime, anywhere. Just open the app and follow along.
From New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this rule and ending this shutdown chaos. For more than 40 days, the American people have endured a painful and entirely avoidable...
This was just yesterday on Wednesday as he was speaking to the press here while attending the G7 summit. And unfortunately, it does seem that it just continues to glitch, and I'm not too sure that it's going to get any better than this. So we're actually going to pivot away from some of these comments, as you can see, still glitching. But I do want to bring us to this, a social media post from Secretary Rubio. He says this: good collaborating with G7 nations to continue our work towards President Trump's mission of enduring peace around the world. Again, he was meeting with several other foreign ministers there. A lot to discuss when it comes to national security, including the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. The first question that he was asked was in regards to that, but also a lot of things top of mind, including the war that continues on in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. And speaking of that, coming up at 8:30 in the morning Eastern time, so in a little over half an hour from now, we are expecting an update from the Israeli government. I want to bring us out to this live image that we have over at Al-Aqsa Hospital there in Gaza. As you can see, several ambulances are on the scene at that hospital. And I want to read some reporting courtesy of the Associated Press as they say this, that Israel's president and high-ranking military officials on Wednesday condemning the attacks a day earlier by Jewish settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank, calling for an end to a growing wave of settler violence in the occupied territory. President Isaac Herzog described the attacks as, quote, shocking and serious, adding a rare and powerful voice to what has been muted criticism by top Israeli officials of the settler violence. Herzog's position, while largely ceremonial, is meant to serve as a moral compass and unifying force for the country. So we'll see what kind of updates we get from the Israeli government briefing come 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Let's head back out to Paris, France, as I do believe that more of these commemoration ceremonies are continuing here, as the entire country right now observing 10 years since the deadly terrorist attacks happened back in 2015, killing more than 130 people. So we can see that a lot of these officials and local authorities there are lining up the streets of yet another site of those attacks. It was 3 in total, as the Islamic State and some of those extremists did issue those coordinated attacks. So let's just stay on this live image for just a bit. While we wait for the French president to come into view on this live look, I want to read some more background information on these attacks in case our viewers are not too familiar. The commemorations that we are seeing throughout the day will culminate with the inauguration of the November 13 Memory Garden. It's going to be a new memorial garden opposite of City Hall, conceived with the victims' associations. It is a stone enclosure from which granite blocks rise to evoke the attack sites engraved with the victims' names. The evening ceremony, which will be attended by the French president, will be built around music and tribute to the spirit of festivity the attackers tried to destroy. I do believe possibly very soon we're going to see Macron coming into frame, but these attacks, they did reshape France's political and emotional landscape, triggering sweeping counterterrorism powers and years of debate over security and liberties. The Paris mayor, the current one, Anne Hidalgo, says she can no longer pass the attack sites, quote, without seeing them through the filter of that terrible night. Speaking of that night, it was on Friday night back in 2015 on November 13th, when 9 Islamic State gunmen and suicide bombers struck within minutes of one another. Suicide bombers detonated outside the Estate de France. Gunmen sprayed bullets across cafe terraces, and 3 attackers stormed the Bataclan at 9:47 p.m., killing 90 people before police ended the siege. 2 survivors who later died by suicide have since been recognized among the victims, bringing the total number of victims to 132. We are seeing French President Macron and First Lady Brigitte entering the scene. So let's continue to watch.
Mesdames, Messieurs, la cérémonie commémorative en hommage aux victimes des attentats du 13 novembre 2015 va débuter. Monsieur Emmanuel Macron, président de la République, Madame Brigitte Macron, Madame Anne Hidalgo, maire de Paris, Monsieur Philippe Duperron, président de l'association 13-11-15 Fraternité et Vérité, et Monsieur Arthur Denovo, président de l'association Life for Paris 13 novembre 2015, ont pris place devant la plaque commémorative. En mémoire des victimes des attentats du 13 novembre. Observons un moment de recueillement. Nous vous remercions. La cérémonie est à présent terminée. Merci beaucoup.
And that was a moment of silence held at another one of the attack sites from back in 2015. Now, a 2021 and 2022 trial ended with life imprisonment without parole for Salah Abdeslam, the lone surviving assailant, and also convictions for 19 others. For many, accountability did not erase the strain of trauma or the daily work of recovery, clarified what must be protected. Names are going to be read and wreaths laid, as you saw within this ceremony, similar to others that we have showcased throughout this entire morning. And we'll continue to see if we get some more of these commemorations featuring the French president, and there you see just one of the plaques that signifies this as one of those sites and remembers the victims. We'll be right back. Taking us out to another live event happening over in Brazil right now as climate action discussions do continue at the COP30 summit.
Renewables, essentially. So it's probably too soon to say that China has peaked, but it looks in a positive direction. So now we move to the United States. The United States had seen a decrease, an annual decrease of 1% emissions over the last 20 years. We project for this year an increase in 1.9%. It's kind of a complex story with the United States this year. So 2023 and 2024, the US had mild winters. This year we've come back to normal winter, so you've gone from 2 mild winters to a normal colder winter, which implies you need more energy for heating. At the same time, the gas price has gone up due to the expansion and capacity of the liquid natural gas. So essentially, to provide the heating, the US has turned to coal. Coal has increased by 7% per year this year. We also don't see a Trump effect or an AI data center effect, but we're sort of anticipating in the future years an impact. So we turn to India. We project an increase in India of 1.4%. That contrasts with a decadal increase of 6% per year. So that's a good news story. So also climate had an effect in India this year. So we had an early onset of the monsoon. So you have the monsoon during the warmest time of year, essentially providing some natural cooling. So with the early onset of the monsoon, you've had less need for cooling systems and energy for cooling. Also, you've had an expansion of solar and wind in India, which has approximately covered the energy demands. For the EU has a declining trend of about 2% per year. We don't quite get that in 2025. So, for example, February was cold in Europe and there wasn't so much wind. But in a sense, Europe is tracking the long-term trends. The fundamentals are there. Finally, we have Japan. So Japan has decreased its emissions in 2025 by about 2%, and that's tracking the decadal value of 2%. And essentially it's the expansion of solar, but also the reactivation of nuclear power stations. So now I pass on to Thais for the land use emissions.
Thanks, Stephen. So I will talk now about the anthropogenic emissions and the land use emissions. And to show the main results, on the left-hand side, you can see that the land use change emissions were about 5 billion tons of CO2 per year in the last decade, on average, so 2015 to 2024. And we see that there was a peak in the 90s, and since then there is a downward trend in emissions. And this has been accelerating recently. The land use emissions term is the net flux between, from many individual terms, such as peat drainage, peat fires, wood harvest, and regrowth of forests, and also the decay of products. But also fluxes related to forest change, that is what you see in the right-hand side figure. There is two types of fluxes, one in pale colors that are associated with regrowth after shift cultivation, so the rotational agriculture that is mostly prevalent in the tropics. And the source and sink terms of CO2 are more or less equal, so they kind of balance. Where they don't balance out is when you look at the permanent deforestation and permanent afforestation and reforestation. So as you can see in this figure is the strong colors. Over the last decade, we still have large emissions from deforestation, about 3.9 billion tons of CO2 per year. And afforestation and restoration around the globe is compensating about 2.2 billion tons per year. When you look again to the left, we see that we have a projection to 2025. This is 4.1 billion tons of billion tons of CO2. And we have very high emissions also in the recent years compared to what we see now in 2025, which is partly related to weather-related events, which is in the background and also influence land use emissions. Next, please. So when you look further on the next slide, where do these emissions really come from regionally? Okay. And we can see that the top 3 emitters on the left-hand side, this will be divided by countries. The largest sink, which is China, and the largest emitters is Brazil, Indonesia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. These top 3, they account about 57% of the emissions over the last decade. The good news is that in Brazil, you see that in the last years, the success of the environmental policy, so the deforestations have reduced and since Lula took office, and consequently, also emissions from deforestation went down. We need to keep in mind, though, that the Amazon faces increasingly other threats, such as degradation from illegal logging, edge effects, and around cleared forest, and also is getting drier with droughts and the degradation fires. So this is partially attributed to the natural term that will be covered later on this presentation. On the right-hand side, you can see a map of the net land use flux over the last decade. And this indicates that some regions already are a net sink when it comes to CO2 from land use activities, in particular China, where afforestation and afforestation for climate reasons and against desertification is on. And also we see some regions in Europe and North America that has been increasing forest cover. Afforestation and reforestation is part of the carbon dioxide removal. So it's basically everything that we do have at the moment. There is other carbon dioxide removal methods, but it still remain negligible at the moment. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the total global CO2 emissions. If you add the emissions, so the global emissions from fossil fuels, that's the black line that Steven presented, and the land use change emissions that I presented before, you get the total CO2 emissions, which is what drives the climate change at the moment. So the total global emissions is the pink line here in this figure, and you can see very clearly the emissions growing very rapidly in the 2000s at the rate of the 1.9 per year on average. And they have leveled off to 0.3% per year in the past decade, compared to the previous decade as well. And the growth of fossil fuels have offset it by a decrease in the land use change emissions. Next slide, please. So now I will talk about the carbon sink. So around half of those emissions are absorbed each year by the land and the ocean carbon sinks. And the sinks are due to unknown process, such as the rising CO2 stimulating photosynthesis on the land, which leads to more biomass and increased CO2 in the atmosphere. This year, we improved our assessment of the sinks by introducing new observations and new process understanding in our methods. And we now show that the land sink was approximately 9 billion tons of CO2. So it takes up around 21% of the total emissions in the past decade. And the ocean CO2 sink was approximately 12 billion tons of CO2, taking up 29% of the total emissions. This improved methodology led to a weaker land sink compared to our previous reports, and a stronger ocean sink. Both the land and the ocean sinks generally increases over the past decade, but that increase is modulated by effect of climate change and also by climate variability. The land sink has been particularly affected by the 2003 and 2004 El Niño, which decreased the sink, as you can see in the figure. So if you focus on the left-hand side, the last year's El Niño caused, in 2003-2004, less absorptions of CO2 on the land, and that time, because of heat and also drought in many regions, especially in the tropics. We expected that this year, the projection is that the land sink will recover from that 2-year perturbations from the El Niño. That is the red point in the figure, which is the pre-El Niño level. Next slide, please. With the improvements in this method, we can now access with more confidence what is the effect of climate change on the sink. So we know, we showed that the impacts of climate change is to reduce the efficiency of the carbon sink both on land and in the ocean. And what you see here in this map is strictly the effect of climate change on the ocean and land sink. On the land sink, this effect of climate change is very important, reducing the current sink by 25% compared to what would be without any climate change effect. So the efficiency of the sink through CO2 is reduced by the effect of climate.
your ability?
Well, they ruled against our country, the court, and they ruled against us before. It's a very liberal court.
You called it highly partisan in your
Well,
social
it certainly
media
is.
posts.
It certainly
and in
is.
fact, it was along ideological lines, 7-4.
Well, except that we actually got one of the Obama judges that was appointed by President Obama voted in favor of the tariffs because he felt it was imperative for our country to thrive and survive even. And I gave him credit. I said, you know what? That took a lot of courage for him to do it because you don't see that often.
So my question is, I suspect you're going to appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court.
Well, we already have, yeah. In fact, we're doing something else. We're going to be going to the Supreme Court, we think, tomorrow because we need an early decision. I mean, look, the financial fabric of our country, we're a rich, incredible country right now, and we're able to, you know, other countries use tariffs on us for years. And we never did. I did a lot during my first term, but then we had COVID and we had to focus on other things. You couldn't be tariffing Italy, Spain, France, as they were dying by the thousands and millions. But we did with China, and China paid us billions and billions of dollars. And I started the process, but then I had to end it a little bit because of COVID. We focused on that. But no, it's a very important decision. And frankly, if they make the wrong decision, it would be a devastation for our country. We've taken in trillions of dollars. And by the way, all these countries signed agreements. As an example, they're all happy. Everybody's happy. But some whack job put in a lawsuit. It went before a very liberal court, and the liberal court ruled, it was 11, they ruled 7-4, with one of the most liberal of them all voting in our favor because they're patriots. I think I give tremendous credit to that judge. And now it's going to the Supreme Court. Now we're going to be asking for early admittance. We're going tomorrow, and we're going to ask for an expedited ruling because, you know, when you look at the stock market's down today, the stock market's down because of that, because the stock market needs the tariffs. They want the tariffs. If you look at AI, all of those, you know, all of that money that's going to be invested, trillions and trillions of dollars, the biggest thing, bigger than the internet, I suspect. It's the internet plus 3 or 4 other things combined. We are leading very substantially with AI. We're leading because of tariffs. We're leading because of talent, and this is where they'd like to be. But without the tariffs, we wouldn't have a chance because we wouldn't be able to protect those investments of the companies coming in. So if you took away tariffs, we could end up being a third world country. That's how big the ruling. So we're asking for an expedited ruling.
As a backstop to that, President, you have a Republican-controlled Congress. You control the House. You control the Senate.
Yeah, but we don't have 60 votes. We don't have 60 votes. I'd love to do that. Oh, if we had 60 senators, if we got the 60 votes, we would get them. But we need 60 votes, and we need, you know, a certain number in the House. I think we'd get, I don't know, we have about 5 of them here. Would everybody agree with me on tariffs? Without tariffs, we're a different country. We have taken in so much money. And here's the thing. We signed a deal with Japan. They're paying us hundreds of billions of dollars. We signed a deal with South Korea. We signed a deal with the European Union. We signed a deal with Europe. And those countries are paying us $950 billion. And they're happy about it. They're okay. As one of them said, it's amazing that we got away with it so long. One of my friends, a leader of one of the countries, and they're fine with it. They all signed. If that ruling ever went against us, I guess we'd have to give back hundreds of billions. We would have to give trillions and trillions of dollars back to countries that have been ripping us off for the last 35 years. And I can't imagine it happening. On a legal basis, they have no legal basis whatsoever. But on a common sense basis, it would destroy America. Okay.
You talked about controlling the sky. On Sunday, the satellite signal of Ursula von der Leyen's plane was alleged.
With Ursula? Well, she had an interesting event. She's a tremendous woman. And so what are you asking me about her?
NATO is concerned about it, I do too, about this electronic
Sure, NATO is
warfare
concerned about
of
it.
Russia.
Well, nobody knows where it came from, but they did take away her ability to use a phone. You know? Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that could happen to me. I'd be very happy.
Mr. President, reducing the tariffs on India from 50%.
What does that mean?
Are you considering taking away some of the tariffs that you've imposed on India? You had posted.
No, we get along with India very well. But India has, you have to understand, for many years it was a one-sided relationship. Only now, since I came along, and because of the power that we have with tariffs, India was charging us tremendous tariffs, about the highest in the world. They were about the highest in the world, number one. And we therefore weren't doing much business with India, but they were doing business with us because we weren't charging them. Foolishly, we weren't charging them. So they would send in massive, everything they made, they'd send it in, pour it into our country. Therefore, it wouldn't be made here, which is a negative. But we would not send in anything because they were charging us 100% tariffs. And, I'll give you an example. Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson couldn't sell into India. There was a 200% tariff on a motorcycle. So what happens? Harley Davidson went to India and built a motorcycle plant. And now they don't have to pay tariffs. Same thing as us. So what we're doing is literally thousands of companies are coming into the U.S., car companies, AI, but, more traditionally, car companies. We have so many car company factories under construction or being designed right now. And they're coming from China, they're coming from Mexico, I must tell you, and they're coming from Canada, a lot of them coming from Canada. But they're coming into our country because they want to build here. And they want to build here for two reasons. Number one, they'd like to be here. And number two, the tariffs are protecting them. And number three, they want to avoid paying tariffs. When they build their cars here, they don't have any tariffs to pay. When you build here, you don't have any tariffs.
Mr. President,
Go ahead,
in
please.
light of the Minnesota shooting last week, the Department of Homeland Security is now awarding more than $100 million to hundreds of faith organizations across the country to help them ramp up security. What's your vision for further protecting religious liberty across the country amid incidents of threats and
So
violence?
religious liberty is so important, and we're talking about every religion now, and we're doing things on that nobody else has ever done, and we're going to be having a big announcement in about 2 weeks on that question. Yeah, please.
On Space Command, sir, are you concerned that people may not be willing to relocate from Colorado to Alabama?
No, I'm not worried. It will get somebody else. The problem with Colorado is they have a very corrupt voting system. I have so many friends in Colorado. Anytime you have mail-in voting, you have corrupt elections. Very simple. It's very simple. Even Jimmy Carter said it with his commission. They set up a commission with him and Scoop Jackson and some people, highly regarded people. And they said the finding was, if you have mail-in voting, you will have corrupt elections. Well, your radical left governor decided that he was going to have all mail-in voting in Colorado. Once you have all mail-in voting, and for whatever reason, the Democrats cheat. And they cheat like, they're not stupid. That's the only thing. They're no good on policy. They're no good on management. They're no good at government. But they're great at cheating. And they stick together, too. I give them credit for sticking together. Please.
Obviously, this is a big win for national security, moving this to Alabama. We've all can agree with that.
Big.
Is there any idea of the economic impact this has on the state and on that local area?
Katie, do you want to answer that?
Look, go ahead, George.
Please go.
This is going to be tremendous. The state of Alabama, what we've seen through this process is the worst of Washington. We've seen politics get in the way of what is best for the warfighter, what's best for national security. And the state of Alabama is about to show the country the best among us. So we know the economic impact is going to be tremendous. There at Redstone Arsenal, we're proud to house everything from the FBI to headquarters there for material command to a number of things. We obviously have NASA with Marshall Space Flight Center, and so this naturally fits within. When you look at the decision matrix that they placed in front of us, that's why we ranked so high, is because we have the resources necessary and the ability to build out quickly to meet the needs in front of us. As far as economic impact, it would be tremendous. Does anybody have an exact number? 1,600 jobs.
3,000 spin off.
With 3,000 spin off. Look at this. This is teamwork right here. So we are really